My name is Daniel Reed. The title successful used to precede it in most conversations, and in my own head most of all. I died on a holiday dedicated to rest from a work accident, after ignoring my family for a career that almost cost me everything. The doctors say my heart stopped for several minutes, but I was gone a lot longer than that. Just a few years ago, I was an architect and chief engineer for a massive construction firm. My life was blueprints and steel beams, measured in millimeters and billable hours. I was the kind of man who designed the skyline, building one skyscraper and gravity-defying bridge at a time. To me, every completed project was a mark of my worth, a testament to my tireless work ethic. I worked relentlessly, dismissing holidays and weekends as inconvenient speed bumps. I ignored my wife's phone call and my son's eager invitations. I told myself all these sacrifices were for my family's future. But the cold, hard truth I rarely allowed myself to acknowledge was that I was addicted to work. It wasn't just a part of my life, it was my life. My firm's culture rewarded this kind of single-minded focus. We were a lean, mean, profit-driven machine, and my job was to push projects forward, no matter the cost. My wife, Sarah, a brilliant engineer herself, had shelved her ambitions to raise our son, Leo. He was 8 years old, a boy with bright eyes and a quick smile, who always wanted to play soccer with me or build with his Legos. But I was always busy. Evenings, I'd stumble in after he was asleep. Mornings, I'd be gone before he was awake. That day was Labor Day, a holiday created to honor workers and give them a chance to rest with their families. But I completely ignored its meaning. Instead of being with my wife and son, I went to the job site. There was a critical structural issue, and I was the only one who could solve it. As I left, I told Leo I'd make it up to him, a hollow promise I had made countless times before. As I drove, I saw parks filled with families, laughing and grilling, and a knot of guilt tightened in my stomach. But I quickly replaced it with the adrenaline of work. I didn't know then, as I pulled up to the site and saw the tired, overworked faces of my crew, that it would be the last time I saw the sun with living eyes. The promise had been simple, a hollow vow that was now a source of conflict. Leo, my son, had woken me up that morning with a new baseball glove, a gift from Sarah he'd been begging me to break in at the park. "Today, Daddy, we can go to the big park with the swings." I'd felt the familiar knot of guilt and resentment. My mind was a blur of calculations and a critical structural issue on the Peterson Tower plans. "Not today, Leo," I snapped, my voice sharp with the stress of a man pushed to his limits. "Daddy has to go to work. We can do it next weekend." The light in his eyes, so bright moments before, had dimmed instantly. Sarah, my wife, had seen it all, her face a mask of silent disappointment that was a heavier reproach than any shouting. "Daniel," she said, her voice low and calm, "it's Labor Day. Please, just one day." But the adrenaline of the looming deadline had already taken over. I had left the house with anger, a cold, hard rage that was as much for my own exhaustion as it was for the demand of a system that put profit over people. As I drove, I passed park after park, filled with families laughing and grilling. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, but I pushed it down, focusing on the problem. On the job site, the air was tense. My crew, a skeleton team of exhausted men, were putting in extra hours to meet an impossible deadline. They were tired, and I was pushing them, just as my superiors were pushing me. A crew member, a man named Carlos, warned me about a faulty scaffold joint. "It's not safe, Mr. Reed. We should shut it down until we can fix it." I waved him off impatiently. "We don't have time, Carlos. Just finish the work." The accident wasn't a spectacle of crashing metal or falling beams. It was a silent, simple mistake, a direct consequence of a system that demanded more than we could give. I was inspecting the very joint Carlos had warned me about, my mind a blur of calculations, and the gnawing guilt I refused to acknowledge. I was so focused, so detached from the physical world that I missed the telltale wobble. A bolt, weakened by a hairline fracture, gave way. The platform shifted. I lost my footing, the world tilted. A sharp, crushing pain. The only thought that broke through the white-hot agony was a whisper of my son's name, Leo. And then a terrifying flash of a blueprint. And then blackness. The platform shifted, and I felt the sickening lurch as I lost my footing. It wasn't a sudden drop, but a slow-motion descent, a dizzying spiral of steel beams and concrete. In that terrifying second, I saw my life flash before my eyes, but not in a way a good man would. I didn't see Leo's face or Sarah's smile. I saw the Peterson Tower, a monument to my ambition, its skeletal frame rising into the clouds. My last, conscious thought wasn't a whisper of love or a plea for forgiveness. It was a final, desperate act of a man whose work was his life. The blueprint, I thought, it's perfect. The project will be a masterpiece. Then a sharp, crushing weight like a sledgehammer hitting my chest. A blinding flash of white, and the world collapsed into a singular, agonizing thought. I had died at work, on a holiday for workers, a tragic irony I didn't have time to comprehend before the blackness came. The blackness wasn't an empty void. It was a silent, unmoving pause. Then I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating, suspended in the air above the scaffolding, looking down at the scene below. I could see my own body, a crumpled heap of my own failure, the work clothes, the hard hat lying uselessly on the concrete. The pain was gone, but it was replaced by a cold, sharp disgust. My body, this tool I had pushed to its limits for my ambition, had failed me. I saw my colleagues rushing to my side, their faces masks of shock and terror. The wail of sirens grew louder in the distance, a desperate, frantic sound that cut through the sudden silence of the construction site. Paramedics arrived, their uniforms a sharp contrast to the dirty yellow of the job site. They worked on my body, their movements a blur of desperate urgency. I saw it all, but I felt no compassion, no fear, no connection to the broken thing they were trying so desperately to save. I was just watching, a silent, weightless observer of my own death, filled with a cold contempt for the earthly vessel that had broken so easily. And then a light began to appear, a soft, warm glow that seemed to pull at me gently, a contrast to the icy feelings I carried. The light that had appeared was a soft, warm glow that seemed to pull at me gently. I felt myself being drawn into this beautiful, all-consuming light, pulled away from the frantic chaos of the construction site. The factory, the sirens, the desperate faces of my colleagues, even the crumpled form of my own body. It all began to fade away, like a dream you can't hold on to when you wake up. There was no struggle, no fear in this moment. But there was no peace either. The cold disgust for my own body, the sense of failure I carried, clung to my spirit like a shadow. I wasn't floating anymore. I was standing, but there was no floor, no walls, no sky. There was just this endless, perfect warmth and light. I had lived my life as a man who understood structure and form, a man who had built things out of steel and glass. But in this place, all of those earthly principles ceased to exist. Here, the very fabric of reality was made of light and peace. My spirit felt new, completely renewed like a fresh canvas, but the shadow of my earthly life still remained. And in the center of it, a figure stood. And in the center of it, a figure stood. It was Jesus. I know people have tried to describe him for 2,000 years, but words are such small, clumsy tools. He wasn't like any painting I'd ever seen, no gentle shepherd or stoic king. The light didn't shine on him, The light came from him. It was woven into his very being, the fabric of who he was. His face, I can't tell you the color of his eyes, but I can tell you what was in them. He looked at me, and I felt like he had been watching me my entire life. Not in a judging way, but in a way that saw every mistake I ever made. Every deadline I prioritized over my family, every selfish thought. Every time my heart grew cold and calloused. And he looked at me with a love so pure, so absolute, so complete, it broke me. Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release. Every wall I had built around my heart, every bit of ambition, every ounce of pride, the constant hum of my workaholic life, it all just melted away under his gaze. I didn't have to explain anything. He already knew. He knew the exhaustion that drove me. He knew the fear I carried, the fear of not being good enough. He didn't speak with a voice that travels through the air. His words were just there, inside my soul. They felt like truth itself. "Peace, my son," he said. "You are home." I fell to my knees. I couldn't speak. I just wept, finally able to let go of the weight I had carried for so long. The light around me, which had been a comfort, now became a canvas. A scene appeared before me, not as a memory, but as a living, breathing reality. And in that reality, I wasn't an actor. I was a witness. Jesus didn't accuse me. He simply showed me. I was watching my life unfold, not just through my family's eyes, but through the eyes of the men who worked for me. The painful self-awakening began. I saw a Thursday evening, the air thick with dust and the noise of construction. We were behind schedule on the Peterson Tower, and I was pushing the crew to their limits. I saw Carlos, the same crew member who had warned me about the faulty scaffold, working late. I felt his exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that came from an impossible deadline. I felt his fear, not of me, but of missing a paycheck, of not being able to provide for his family. My ambition, my relentless drive for success, was not just an internal battle. It was a system of exploitation that I had perpetuated, a system that valued deadlines over human beings. Then the scene shifted. I was watching a moment I had almost forgotten, a moment when I had dismissed an environmental report on one of our other projects. The report had warned of the project's devastating impact on a local wetland. I had called it unnecessary red tape and pushed the project through. Now I felt the anguish of the community that had been displaced, the loss of a natural sanctuary that had been a part of their lives for generations. My success, the beautiful buildings I had built, were not just a mark of my worth. They were a monument to the injustice and suffering of others. The agonizing life review faded, and the light around me shifted again, becoming a window into a future that was both terrifying and possible. I was shown two paths, two futures for my family. The first was a grim, silent testament to the path I was on. I saw my home, the same home I had just left, but it was different. It was a place of ghosts, haunted by my absence. Sarah was a widow. I saw her face, older now, etched with a quiet sorrow and a hard cynicism that time had not healed. She had returned to engineering, but her brilliance was a cold, bitter light. The projects she built were flawless, but the joy, the passion, the warmth that had once been in her eyes were gone. She was successful, but I felt her profound resentment. The bitterness for the dreams she had sacrificed for a man who had ultimately chosen his work over her. I saw Leo. He was older now, a young man, but his eyes, which had been so bright as a boy, held a familiar, distant anger. He was still quiet and introspective, the energy I had so often ignored replaced by a deep-seated loneliness. I saw him with his own son, a new baseball glove in his hand. He was trying to teach his boy how to play, but he looked unsure. like a man who was teaching from a book he had never read. He was trying to give his son the one thing I had never given him, my time, my presence. But he was doing it with a hollowness I had left behind. The ultimate tragedy of this vision wasn't just my absence. It was the ripple effect of my absence, a legacy of anger and grief that I had unknowingly left behind. My hard work, the hours I had put in, the success I had chased, it all amounted to this, a life that was a monument to my absence. That grim vision of a future without me faded, and the light around me shifted again, becoming a new window into a different possibility. The second path. This one didn't start with success or applause. It started with the ultimate sacrifice. I saw a new version of myself, but he was nothing like the man who died in the factory. He had given up everything. The downtown condo was gone. The luxury car was sold. The projects were handed over to someone else. He had traded his reputation as a chief engineer for a path of humility. The work he did now was humble, manual labor, but his hands, once calloused from blueprints, were now calloused from honest work. The reward wasn't professional success. The reward was joy. I saw myself at home, not as a monument to my absence, but as a living, breathing part of the family. The laughter had returned to Sarah's eyes. The bitterness was gone, replaced by a love that was deeper and more authentic. Leo's face, which had been so full of distant anger in the first vision, was now a mask of pure joy, his eyes bright with the light of a father's presence. The greatest work I saw in this vision wasn't a skyscraper or a bridge. It was the joy on my son's face, the laughter of my wife, the quiet peace in our home. This was the one path that led to salvation. The path of giving up everything I had built to build a life that truly mattered. The vision of my family's happiness faded, and the light around me stilled again. Jesus was silent, waiting for me to comprehend the lesson. He didn't speak with a voice, but his words filled my soul with a truth so profound. It reordered my entire understanding of life. He showed me that the labor I had dedicated my life to, the blueprints, the steel, the concrete, was not just work, it had become an idol. I had worshipped it, offered my time, my energy, and my family on its altar. He then showed me that my success was built on a foundation of injustice and suffering. He showed me a blueprint, a beautiful, flawless design for a skyscraper. But beneath the perfect lines, I saw the exhausted faces of my crew, the very men I had pushed to their limits to meet a deadline. I saw the low wages I had approved, the safety warnings I had ignored. My buildings, the monuments to my ambition, were not built on concrete and steel alone. They were built on the backs of exploited workers, on the foundation of their pain and my indifference. The true labor, he showed me, was the labor of the heart, built not on ambition and profit, but on justice and love. The silent reckoning, the revelation of my work as an idol and my success as a monument to suffering, shattered me completely. The choice was a million times clearer than any engineering calculation I had ever performed. The choice was not about what I had to gain, but about what I had to lose. And in that moment, all the projects, all the praise, all the worldly success, none of it meant anything to me. I was willing to give it all up for a second chance. I didn't just ask, I begged him. Please, my soul cried out, let me go back. Let me live the second path. I will do anything. I will sell everything. I will be the man my family deserves, the man those workers deserve. The desperation of my plea was raw and unedited, a complete surrender of the pride that had defined my life. He accepted my plea. A wave of his life, his strength, his love poured into me. It was not a physical sensation, but a spiritual one, a profound and complete filling of my broken soul. The exhaustion and fear that had defined my life were replaced by a holy, unshakable resolve. You must go back and share your story. A voice, not of air but of pure truth, filled my being. Tell them what I have shown you. You will face opposition. They will call you a fool. But you must tell them the true meaning of labor and love. And then I felt myself falling, pulled back down, away from the light, back into the cold and the dark. It wasn't a gentle journey. It was a violent jolt that shot through me, a tearing of my spirit away from its perfect home and back into the brokenness of the world. A violent jolt shot through me, a physical shock that tore me away from the perfect peace I had known. My eyes flew open. The light was blinding, a sterile white ceiling, a high-pitched beeping sound, fast and loud. A man in blue scrubs was leaning over me, his eyes wide with surprise. "We've got him, we've got a pulse," someone shouted. My chest felt like it had been kicked by a horse. I gasped for air, a deep, ragged breath that burned my lungs. I tried to sit up, but hands pushed me gently back down. Sir, calm down, you're in the hospital. You had a massive heart attack," a kind voice said. A doctor came in later. He had a file in his hands and a look of complete disbelief on his face. "Mr. Reed," he started, clearing his throat. "I need you to understand what happened. Your heart stopped. You had no pulse for several minutes. By all medical standards, you should not be here. And even if you were, you should have severe, catastrophic brain damage. But your scans are perfectly normal. We have no medical explanation for this." I just looked at him and nodded. A quiet tear rolled down my cheek. The world's explanation was not enough. I had my own. Sarah came to me, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She was relieved, but there was a deep-seated fear in her gaze, a fear I had never seen before. When I tried to tell her what I had seen, of the light, of Jesus, of the vision, she just shook her head. "Daniel," she said, her voice a low, desperate whisper. "You were gone for a long time. This was a stroke, a cerebral event brought on by overwork and exhaustion." She had her own explanation, a medical, rational one that fit neatly into her secular world. My spiritual reality was a direct threat to her logic, and the chasm between us, which had been growing for years, was now a chasm of reason and faith. My new life began in that hospital bed. My body was healing, but my spirit was already in a full sprint. The man who was once obsessed with building skyscrapers was now obsessed with tearing down the false monument of his own life. The first thing I did was resign from my job. My partners, the men I had built an empire with, thought I had lost my mind. They offered me a leave of absence, a consulting role, anything to keep me from walking away from my reputation and my wealth. I politely declined all of it. I sold the condo, I sold the luxury car. The marks of my success, the things I had used to define myself, were now just empty, hollow symbols. Sarah was furious. She saw it all as a betrayal. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "This wasn't a spiritual awakening. This was a stroke. You are not a prophet, you are a man with a brain injury. You're throwing away everything we've built, everything we've worked for. You're throwing away our family's future." She didn't understand. She couldn't. She saw me dismantling our life, and she believed I was a man who had gone mad. Our relationship, which had been strained by my work, was now on the brink of collapse. A war between her reason and my faith. My new life was a world away from the one I had built. I had traded my reputation as a chief engineer for the ridicule of my peers. The men I had once built an empire with now looked at me with a mixture of contempt and pity. They called me crazy, a man who had lost his mind after a brain event. I was the subject of whispers, a cautionary tale of a man who had traded his success for a spiritual fairy tale. But I didn't care. The praise of these men, which had once meant everything to me, was now a hollow echo. My mission was now a dual one. I began to speak about my experience, not from a place of professional authority, but from a place of humility and gratitude. My message wasn't just about the dangers of workaholism. I spoke about the exploitation I had perpetuated, the men I had pushed to their limits, the safety warnings I had ignored. I spoke about the men I had wronged and the system that had allowed me to do it. I became a voice for the voiceless, a man who had to die to learn that his success was built on the backs of others. My audience was no longer just boardrooms and clients. I spoke to union leaders, to young engineers, and to anyone who would listen about the true meaning of labor. My story was a message of redemption and justice, a warning that the price of success can be a debt you can't pay back. So that is my message to you. I'm not an expert or a spiritual leader. I'm a man who was allowed to die to see the truth. You will have another Labor Day, another holiday. The world will tell you to put your hope in those things, in the success, in the deadlines met, in the projects completed. But I am here to tell you, as someone who has stood on the other side, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't chase the fleeting work of your hands and forget the eternal labor of your heart. The greatest work you will ever do will not be on a blueprint or in a boardroom. It will be in the quiet moments you spend with your family, in the justice you fight for, in the love you give. It will be the work of being present, of showing up, of choosing love and justice over success. Your life is not a monument to be built, but a garden to be tended. The silence that followed my testimony in those early days was often deafening. People looked at me with a mixture of pity and disbelief, the same look Sarah gave me across the dinner table. But then, slowly, tentatively, the messages started to trickle in. Emails, handwritten letters slipped under our door, comments on the few online videos I dared to share. People reaching out, sharing their own struggles, their own awakenings, their own questions about the true meaning of their labor. That's why I share my story. It's not for fame or recognition. It's to plant a seed, to spark a conversation, to maybe, just maybe, help someone else see the forest for the trees before it's too late. What resonates with you most about my experience? Have you ever felt that pull between your work and your loved ones? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Your story matters, and maybe, just maybe, by sharing our experiences, we can all learn to live a life filled with the true labor of love and justice. Before our own Labor Day comes,